This is Transfer Talk. Just 4 days remain in this January transfer window and Aston Villa are right in the centre of it. Both of their strikers, Ollie Watkins and John Duran, are the subject of bids. Will they lose both of them? Also this hour, Ruben Amorim once again calls on Marcus Rashford to change as the forward's future remains unclear. Mathis Tel is wanted by several Premier League clubs in this window. Will Bayern Munich allow him to leave, though? And it's WSL deadline day, and we've got developments on the future of Chloe Kelly. Will she leave Manchester City? A very good afternoon to Flex and James Savundja, and of course you at home watching. We start with the incredible developments involving two of Aston Villa's strikers, Ollie Watkins and John Duran. It's our understanding that Arsenal will make a second bid to sign Watkins after seeing their first offer rejected. Watkins, of course, scored and missed a penalty in last night's 4-2 Champions League win over Celtic. And after the game, his manager Unai Emery made it clear they don't want to sell him.
It's good news to have an offer for another club is good, or interest is good. But I don't want. Of course, we want to keep the player we have in the squad, and of course, every player can be as well in the market in case is good for the player, for the club, and for the team. But to get this deal, of course, we are going to be very demanding as well. And Watkins is our striker.
Now, our reporter Daniel Kahn was at the Villa game last night and spoke to Emery after the game. And Daniel actually joins us on Transfer Talk right now. Dan, you're of course at Leicester ahead of speaking to Ruud van Nistelrooy. But before we discuss that, it seemed pretty clear that Emery does not want Ollie Watkins to go.
Yeah, good afternoon. Absolutely. I mean, I was in that press conference after. What an amazing game it was against Celtic. But it all felt somewhat secondary considering what a fantastic evening it was because of all the news that was breaking just before the game, during the game about John Duran and Ollie Watkins. Watkins being the subject of a bid by Arsenal reportedly earlier in the week, but it was only rejected yesterday by Villa, and really it didn't come at particularly good timing ahead of what was such a crucial game in the Champions League for Aston Villa. But Unai Emery said yesterday that he is our striker and I don't want him to go, and that's because he is his number one striker. I mean, we can talk about the competition between Watkins and Duran, but this season Duran had only started 7 games in all competitions, and Ollie Watkins, not just the numbers, of course you see how he's scored double-digit goals since his arrival every season at Aston Villa, but you just look at what he does off the ball for the side in this structure that Unai Emery really likes. It's been really no competition for Ollie Watkins in that sense. He has been Unai Emery's number one, and that's why really he was very adamant yesterday that he doesn't want him to go, and if he is, it has to be a very, very, very good offer. But I think there was a big difference in terms of how he spoke about Watkins compared to John Duran yesterday, so it'd be very, very surprising to see Watkins go at this stage late in the window.
Well, John Duran was sat on the bench for the game. He didn't look happy for the cameras to be in his face. While it was all happening, Al Nassr were agreeing fees to sign him. Where do we stand with that deal? Because that looks like it's getting more and more likely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we understand that Al Nassr are very confident they've agreed a deal with Villa on that, just over £64 million for John Duran. It's being widely reported that he's set to undergo medical today in London ahead of that move. And Unai Emery did speak quite a lot about the proposed move. He said he didn't want to talk too much because it hasn't been finalised that close to being completed just yet. But he essentially said that it was too good of an offer for Aston Villa to say no to. He didn't want to lose someone like John Duran this month, but he also said that the player has his own ambitions and he has to follow that. And ultimately, Emery, I sat down with him a few weeks ago and he said with transfers especially, there's 3 real things he has to think about. What works for the club, what works for the players, and what works for the team. I think for the club, when you consider they bought him for just £18 million 2 years ago, and they're set to make 3 times that from his sale in terms of profit. It'll do really good for the club in terms of that side, make them more flexible in the final days of the window. But also for the player himself, it was very clear from what Emery said yesterday that he wants to move on as well. And in terms of the team, it will give, as I mentioned, Emery a bit more flexibility in the market, not just to look for a replacement for Duran, but they're also looking at defensive reinforcements as well, with Diego Carlos leaving the club. They only have one recognisable centre-back who played last night who was fit. That was Ezri Konza. Boubacar Kamara played next to him. So very much looking at reinforcements on that side of the pitch because they are missing Tyrone Mings and Pau Torres. We've reported in the last few days they are interested in the likes of João Felix, who's only started 3 games for Chelsea, and Axel Disasi as well. That would potentially be a loan. So something to look out for as Unai Emery looks to really bolster this squad with a few departures in the final days of the window.
Dan, we mentioned you are at Leicester, so it's only right we talk about them. Still just the one signing, Woyo Koulibaly. Are there any signs of any more incomings?
I mean, I think everyone connected with Leicester, whether it's the fan base or even Ruud van Nistelrooy, I think will be slightly frustrated about the window they've had so far. I remember asking Ruud van Nistelrooy in December just how planning was going for the window, and he was saying that a lot of work had been going into looking at reinforcements this month. There's already been a few outgoings, the likes of Tom Cannon, who was sold to Sheffield United for £10 million. Hamza Chowdhury has also left the club on loan there as well. So that's given a bit of space in the squad, a bit of flexibility in terms of finances. And really, when you look at Leicester's squad, I think they'll be targeting a centre-back in the final days of the window because they've not been able to keep a clean sheet since Ruud van Nistelrooy has taken charge. They look quite fragile on that side of the pitch. You also look at the rest of the squad, perhaps a winger, because they really haven't been able to replace Abdul Fattah since his season-ending injury on that right-hand side. They are missing that goal threat as well. So, but I think for Ruud van Nistelrooy, he's been pretty clear that they haven't been close necessarily to getting any of these deals over the line just yet. And I think he'll really be hoping to do so, because when you look at the work, say, Wolves have done signing Agbadou for around £20 million at centre-back, you look at Ipswich, what they're doing, the teams in and around Leicester are making reinforcement signings in that sense, in that relegation battle, and Leicester so far have yet to do so. So feels like a huge few days for Ruud van Nistelrooy and Leicester with deadline day looming. I'll be putting the questions to Ruud van Nistelrooy himself to see what could potentially happen. We'll be hearing from the Leicester boss from just after 1:30.
Thank you very much, Dan. So will Arsenal come in with a second bid for Ollie Watkins? It's no secret that he is a boyhood Arsenal fan. This is what he had to say while at Brentford in 2020 and revealed his idol is a club legend.
Thierry Henry, I'm an Arsenal fan. Thierry Henry was he's unbelievable to watch. And yeah, he was the idol growing up, really.
Would it be your preference to go to Arsenal, having supported them as a kid, if you could choose?
I mean, the dream. That's the dream, to play for Arsenal one day. But you know, it's a long shot. It's only because my family support them and stuff like that. But you know, that's a long.
Ollie Watkins there saying that would be the dream, to play for Arsenal. I think timing is everything in football. There may not be another chance for Ollie Watkins to join Arsenal. But Flex, having listened to that and obviously knowing that Arsenal have put in a bid for Ollie Watkins, what is Ollie Watkins thinking right now?
Well, first of all, like you said, that was 5 years ago. It's a long time in football, and you look at what his career's gone on to be since those days at Brentford, which has been nothing but an upward trajectory for his whole career. He's been absolutely fantastic. On a personal for him, I would imagine he will obviously feel quite warm and quite excited at the fact that Arsenal are after him. Even Unai Emery said that it's a compliment that teams are after our players. It means we're developing them pretty well. But in terms of remaining focused on what he needs to for the next 4 days, he's going to just keep scoring goals. He's going to keep scoring goals. He's a top professional. He's been absolutely fantastic since he's been in the Premier League ever since then. He scores goals. So I think it will be really interesting to look at if things change and a bigger bid comes in and maybe Aston Villa say, well, Ollie, this is coming. What do you think? We already know he loves Arsenal.
Yeah.
So as an individual, as a fan, but he's a top professional. I don't think this will unsettle him.
Yeah, there's a clear reason, though, isn't there, James, why Arsenal are going for Ollie Watkins? Just maybe a little bit strange they didn't go for him sooner in the window.
Yeah, that will be the one thing you'd argue. Why has it taken them so long if he was the target all along? We've been discussing internally amongst themselves about what they look to do in this transfer window. Clearly, they'd have had a number of targets in mind over the course of the last few years, because that striker search has been going on for a long period of time, but some of those options perhaps weren't available in this window. We know Benjamin Sesko was one of those, but it looks likely that if he's to get a move away from RB Leipzig, it would be in the summer. So Gabriel Jesus was injured on, I think, the 11th or 12th of January. It's taken them 2 weeks to then decide to make a bid for Ollie Watkins on the eve of a really important match to them in the Champions League, which means if they do go back to the table, which we understand they will do, negotiations are going to be quite difficult, because Aston Villa are clearly very unhappy with the timing of this bid. But in terms of Ollie Watkins himself, it's clear why Arsenal want him. He's been brilliant at whatever level he's played at, from non-league to League Two to the Championship with Brentford to the Premier League with Aston Villa to the Champions League with Aston Villa as well. And that peak last season, 19 goals and 13 assists, which helped Aston Villa get into the Champions League. This season, his goals and John Duran's goals have helped Aston Villa ensure they finish in the top 8 of the Champions League group stage. Their first foray into the Champions League since the Champions League was brought in, because they've not played in Europe for 40 years before that in the top tier of European football. And Arsenal fans know so well how good Ollie Watkins is, because he's seriously derailed their title chances this season and last season. Last season it was devastating. His goal at the Emirates helped Aston Villa win 2-0 at the Emirates. That's actually the last time Arsenal have lost at home in the Premier League, and Arsenal won every game after that, but it wasn't enough to be able to catch up with City right at the end. So it's clear, you don't need me to tell you why Ollie Watkins is so good. There's not many players that do what Ollie Watkins does, and that is why Aston Villa are in such a brilliant position they're in right now, because he's got 3 years left in his contract. They don't need to sell him, and if it looks like another striker is departing the football club, then it seems very unlikely they're going to let him go, even if there is wild money that Arsenal throw out in the final days of this window.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see if Arsenal do throw wild money at Villa for Ollie Watkins, just to test and see how they deal with that. But if he does end up going to Arsenal, Flex, he would be their most prolific forward. There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely, for all the reasons why James just outlaid for us, because they've needed somebody of this quality. They've needed an out-and-out number 9, somebody that's reliable and dependable and consistent in goal scoring. And if you compare Ollie Watkins to Arsenal strikers of late, you know, you look at Kai Havertz there with 8 goals so far this season in 20 games. Gabriel Jesus, of course, has not been getting the game time he would like because of Kai Havertz and injuries, only scoring 3 goals. And Ollie Watkins has scored more than both with 10. And you look at the amount of shots he gets per night, he's getting himself into those positions, 3.31 shots per night, and the conversion rate is higher than the other 2 as well. So it's exactly what Arsenal need. They need it. And for me, I just can't, you know, if you're an Arsenal fan, this is why Arsenal fans, I think, are frustrated. The lack of aggressiveness from Arsenal to go and get a deal done for a forward, not only in the summer, but even now, as they were approaching into the January window, they knew that they needed this type of player. They've waited, and now John Duran's gone on the move, and then you're looking at even more difficult to get Ollie Watkins out of this situation at Villa, because why would Aston Villa entertain anything, you know, that isn't super substantial? So Arsenal only got themselves to blame if they don't end up with a striker in this window, but also someone as good as Ollie Watkins.
Yeah, well, it definitely looks like one of their 2 strikers is off, James, and that's John Duran. This one's moved very quickly. Just first of all, where are we at? And do you understand why the player himself, because I think there will be some question marks from some people over why a 21-year-old is going to play his football in Saudi at this early stage in his career, but do you understand why he's making that decision? Yeah,
firstly, things look like they've accelerated really quickly. The Athletic reporting that John Duran has completed his medical and is set to fly to Saudi Arabia tomorrow to finalise a proposed move to Al Nassr. We understand the fee around €77 million. Let's bear in mind Aston Villa bought him for £18 million 2 years ago. It just shows how much promise he showed in that time, and it shows just what good business Aston Villa have done right now in terms of the profit they're going to make on this player. It shows you how quickly things move in football, because it was only in October he signed a new contract to take him up to 2030 at Aston Villa. So that shows you how highly Aston Villa valued him. That shows the commitment that he had to the football club as well. I think there'll be lots of people critical of John Duran because he's not joining a club in the top 5 leagues in Europe. He's going to the Saudi Pro League. But I think you need to look at his story in football and his story in life to understand why this is an offer which he looks like he's going to take right now. He grew up in a very deprived area in Colombia, and I think when this sort of money and this sort of offer is put on the table for you to be able to secure your own life and your family's life as well, you can't argue against a player deciding to make that move. Of course, there'll be opportunities to play alongside Cristiano Ronaldo as well. He's clearly got immense self-belief in himself. We understand that. That's why he was looking for a move in the summer. Initially, he wanted to go to West Ham because he thinks he should be the main man wherever he is. And at this moment in time, because Ollie Watkins is there, yes, he's got the opportunities. Yes, there's been a brilliant showreel of moments already this season with some of the late goals in the Premier League and in the Champions League. But ultimately, he's only played 4 matches where he started in the Premier League this season. He wants to take what he feels is the right move for him. And at this moment in time, as disappointing as it is to see a player at this age decide to make the move and go to the Saudi Pro League, which is clearly an inferior league to the Premier League and some of the top leagues in Europe, you can understand why, personally, he's decided to make the move right now.
I think this is a brilliant deal for Aston Villa. Honestly, of course, when he's on his way up and he's scoring goals and he's having a flash in the pan and he's scoring, like you say, highlight reel goals, that's great and he looks like he's got a great future. But Aston Villa have absolutely operated in a brilliant way. They've secured John Duran on a massive contract. They've managed to get him a glimpse to the world of football, so people are interested in him. And after buying him for 80 million, they're selling him for 60 plus. Yeah. So if you're an Aston Villa fan, OK, it might be a bit disappointing to lose him, but at the end of it, Aston Villa, the football club, have done fantastically well.
Right, still to come on Transfer Talk, we'll be live to Nottingham Forest. Will they make a signing before the window closes? And we'll hear from Ruben Amorim, who calls on Marcus Rashford to change. Welcome back to Transfer Talk. We have some breaking news and it's what we have been discussing. Aston Villa striker John Duran has completed his Al Nassr medical and is set to fly to Saudi Arabia. Al Nassr are understood to be paying just over £64 million plus bonuses for the 21-year-old, who will, of course, now be playing his football alongside Cristiano Ronaldo. So John Duran has completed his Al Nassr medical and is set to fly to Saudi Arabia. Right, Nottingham Forest suffered a shock 5-0 defeat to Bournemouth last weekend. And at the club's training ground for us now is Rob Jones. Rob, great to speak to you. Let's start with transfers then. Forest were after a forward in this window. Seems to have gone a little bit quiet on the likes of Mathis Tel and Yoane Wissa.
Yeah, and I think it's probably important to look at it from the other two clubs' perspective when you discuss Cunha and Wissa. We'll take Matheus Cunha first. And what sort of message would it send from Wolves as a club if they were to allow their top scorer in the Premier League to leave just a few days before the transfer window closes with, you would say, pretty much no chance of replacing Cunha with a player of similar ability as Wolves look to stay in the Premier League. And if you look at it from it being probably 2 from 3 now of Wolves, Leicester and Ipswich, it maybe doesn't feel too simplistic to say keeping Cunha or not might well decide whether Wolves stay in the Premier League or not. So if I was Vitor Pereira or Matt Hobbs, the sporting director at Wolves, or anyone else who was involved in those discussions, you would say to Matheus Cunha, give us 4 more months. If you really want to go, we'll have this conversation again in the summer. As for Yoane Wissa, it's quite interesting. I was at the Nottingham Forest game 11 days ago when they beat Southampton here by 3-2 and had a conversation that day that Forest were really confident of getting Yoane Wissa over the line between now and the deadline on Monday. In contrast, if you listen to Thomas Frank speak, you would say that that is maybe not the case. He was asked last week about Yoane Wissa. He said, from my perspective, the player is not for sale. He said, do you think that Forest should leave it and go elsewhere? And he said, yep, that's exactly what I'd say. Yoane Wissa, Brentford's leading Premier League goal scorer of all time. He's got 18 months left on his contract, so it'll be a year in the summer. So again, just as we saw with Ivan Toney, who had a year left on his contract last summer, that might be a conversation that Brentford will go back to with Wissa in just a few months' time as to whether or not he might want to leave the club then.
And what's the feeling amongst the camp then? Obviously, a largely absolutely brilliant season for Forest, but that was a big defeat to Bournemouth at the weekend, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that is really coming back down to earth with a bump, isn't it, for Nottingham Forest, after, as you rightly said, an incredible run of form that took them as high as second place in the Premier League table at one stage. 7 victories in 8 matches. The only time they dropped points in that little sequence before being thumped by Bournemouth last weekend was a draw with Liverpool at the City ground. And it was quite interesting. I was also at that game, that 1-1 with Liverpool just a couple of weeks ago. And it seemed telling to me that at the final whistle, those Nottingham Forest players were absolutely exhausted. They'd put everything into that match. They defended so bravely, particularly in the second half of that game against the Premier League leaders. And I wonder whether that started to catch up with Forest at the Vitality last weekend against the team themselves, who are absolutely bang in form. The other thing that you would say about Nottingham Forest is that Nuno Espirito Santo doesn't make too many changes to his team, and that if Forest, we've talked about recruitment and transfers, are looking forward into next season when they might be in Europe, getting players to bolster the squad is important too, because it's a really good, strong 12 or 13, 14 players that Forest have got, but maybe the drop-off after that is quite telling. But you would say that the next 5 games for Nottingham Forest will tell us a lot about whether they are going to be playing European football next year against 5 teams who themselves will have similar ambitions, starting with Brighton, Fulham, Newcastle, Arsenal and Manchester City next up in the Premier League for Forest. All 5 of those reverse fixtures earlier in the season, Forest didn't win any of them. So this is a clutch moment in their season, and we'll hear from Nuno Espirito Santo from 1:30 this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Rob. Just want to bring you a quick reminder of that breaking news we brought you just a moment ago, and that is that Aston Villa striker John Duran has completed his Al Nassr medical and is set to fly to Saudi Arabia in a deal worth over £64 million. Well, that's an outgoing at Villa. What about at Manchester United? We could be set for a thrilling end to the window. There could be at least 3 players leaving the club. One of those may well be Marcus Rashford. United boss Ruben Amorim insisted last night there is nothing personal with Rashford, but the forward has to change if he is to be part of his plans.
Our team should be so much better with Rashford. But this Rashford, he has to change. If he change, we are more than welcome to put a talent like Rashford, and we need it. So, but in this moment, I think it's really clear that we have to set some standards. That's all. We are waiting for Marcus if he wants really, really bad. That's the only thing. So it's you try to make like something personally. It's not personal. I have nothing against Marcus. I just have to make the same rules for everybody, and that for me it's so simple. My sentence was that I will not put any player that don't give the maximums. I didn't say I will not put Marcus Rashford. So when I feel that is the right moment, I will put any player to play. But until that the right moment, I will not change my mind, that's all.
Yeah, he's paid by Manchester United to be a player of a certain standard and meet the standards of United. If he's not reaching those consistently over a sort of 5 or 6 week period, surely it's a disciplinary matter because he's not doing what he's paid for.
No, it's training, it's not good enough, he's not playing, that's all.
So Amorim saying Marcus Rashford has to change, but Flex, the big question is, do you think he can change?
Honestly, it's something that Jose Mourinho's challenged him to do. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's challenged him to do. Erik Ten Hag's challenged him to do. Ralf Rangnick challenged him to do. And now we're seeing Ruben Amorim challenging him to do the same thing. Marcus Rashford is in control of Marcus Rashford's football career, and so far he's had some really good moments, and he showed what a player he can be. You know, the season before last, hitting 30 goals. So you know that there's a player inside Marcus Rashford, but only Marcus Rashford himself knows the reason why this has happened and the reason why he can't get back into it. I think Ruben Amorim is trying to make it abundantly clear. I don't think he can make it any clearer. He's not training well enough. That's it. There's loads of caveats around that regarding what it looks like for a move, how comes he's still at the club, what the finances look like, etc., etc. But as a professional, that's a really damning indictment for the new Manchester United manager to come in and have that assessment of Marcus Rashford this early into his tenure and to take this drastic action. So the truth is, Olivia, I don't know. It's the hope that gets to, isn't it, as a United fan? We all want Marcus Rashford to do well, and the fact that it's looking like it's going to end this way is disappointing as a United fan. He's United born and bred. You would expect him, you would have wanted Marcus Rashford to have his whole career at United and return Man United back to the summit of English football with a Premier League title, etc., and European titles. But it's not working like that. And to see Marcus Rashford just look a shell of himself, to see that he doesn't look confident, doesn't look like he wants to be there. He said he wants a new challenge as well. You couple all these things with what Ruben Amorim's saying, it doesn't look like he's going to be able to turn it around, because the evidence that we've seen in previous years would lead us to believe that he probably can't. And that's not a nice thing to say, but it's what we're seeing.
James, do you think the way that Marcus Rashford has acted in this situation has put off maybe potential suitors for the summer as well?
I think the concern is, as Flex alluded to there, the last few Manchester United managers have had different issues with Marcus Rashford. He's got a contract until 2028. He's got a salary of more than £300,000 a week. So for potential suitors for clubs looking to buy him, what would concern me is the fact that Ruben Amorim has come in at a vital point in Manchester United's history to try and turn the wheel and try to get them winning things again. And within weeks of Ruben Amorim taking charge, there is already an issue with Marcus Rashford. There's already an issue with how he's training and his attitude. So that means, for someone who's not played for the last 11 matches, he's not been in any matchday squad apart from one, but he didn't feature in the match. He's not played for more than a month now. So if you're a potential club looking to buy him, each week the value you think Manchester United can get from him diminishes week by week. I think it's going to be very difficult for any club to be willing to match his wage demands, because there's an argument he could go to a club and there'll be an issue immediately, because that's happened over the course of the last few seasons with various Manchester United managers. There's going to need to be a compromise from Rashford when it comes to wages. There's going to have to be a real compromise from United when it comes to fee, because they're not going to get the sort of money they thought they got for him unless there's a way of reintegrating him if he doesn't move in January. But I know Ruben Amorim is saying that we want Marcus Rashford. We want the Marcus Rashford that we've seen before. I wonder if they're just words, and I do think that he's somebody that Ruben Amorim can't trust, and I can't see him play for United again, to be honest, the way things are right now.
Right, just a reminder of the breaking news this hour. John Duran's completed his medical ahead of a £64 million move to Al Nassr. Coming up next, could Mathis Tel be on his way out of the Bundesliga? Coming up, we'll be live to Germany to speak to Florian Plettenberg.
I think so. First of all, hi Olivia, hi here from Munich. Yeah, it's a big news coming up in the last couple of days in this transfer window that Mathis Tel has decided about his decision a few weeks ago. He said, "Oh, I definitely want to stay with FC Bayern. I'm fighting for my chance," and now he has taken the decision to leave FC Bayern, and there is no doubt about it because right now there are ongoing talks. Mathis Tel, he's not a super talent. He's a very big talent, but his performances, to be honest, in the last couple of weeks and months, they haven't been that good. So this is the reason why Bayern is open to let him go. And the first big and relevant update is that Bayern Munich is very open, not just for a loan with an obligation or with an option to buy. Bayern Munich is indeed open for a permanent deal, as I got the confirmation from close sources today. What I can't say right now is how much money Bayern Munich will demand, but I expect them to demand far more than 45 million euro for Mathis Tel. And an exclusive update right now is that Bayern Munich and Tottenham, they have opened talks, direct talks and negotiations about Mathis Tel. Tottenham currently very, very pushing and talking for and about Mathis Tel at this stage. I cannot say if they will find an agreement, but Tottenham have definitely open talks with FC Bayern. More clubs are involved. Aston Villa, Chelsea still in, as well as Marseille.
I'm sure Spurs fans will be excited to hear that. Florian, what type of player is he then? What could we expect to see from him?
First of all, I have to say he's a great character. 19 years old. He has learned speaking German very fast. He's speaking German very, very good. The fans, to be honest, they love him. He was always gentle, always friendly. He said hello to every guy who was working with FC Bayern, who was working inside the club, who was working at the training ground. He said hello to every fan. So the fans, they cannot understand why he will leave FC Bayern, but there's an understanding for the fact that he needs regular playing time. So a great, great character. I have often spoken with him. Fantastic guy, open-minded, friendly, always smiling. But he needs to choose the right club right now, because this is a very, very important step in his career. As I said, in the last couple of weeks and months, he was not a regular player, far away from this. Now he has to play. Now he has to gain minutes.
Florian, Evan Ferguson is a man in demand. Could a move to Bayer Leverkusen happen or not?
Well, to be honest, I think he will not join Bayern with Leverkusen. He was a candidate in the case that Victor Boniface will head to Al Nassr. But as we know right now, the deal with Victor Boniface is close to be off. He was ready to travel to Al Nassr. He has passed his medical with Al Nassr in Germany 3 days ago successfully. There were total verbal agreements with Boniface and Al Nassr. There was a total verbal agreement between Al Nassr and Bayern Leverkusen about a transfer fee of more than 60 million euro. But Al Nassr has decided to cancel this deal. They have not signed the agreements. So Leverkusen, very, very angry, but they have explored Ferguson in case that Victor Boniface is leaving. So, and if Boniface would stay at Leverkusen, what is very likely at this stage, I cannot imagine that they will sign another striker.
Florian, finally tell us about Stefanos Tsitsipas. Who wants to sign him in this window?
Do you know him? Have you ever heard in the UK about Stefanos?
This is the first time I've heard of him.
Okay, so let me say some things about him. Stefanos Tsitsipas. He's a 19-year-old striker. He's not talented. He is very, very talented. And the boss from 1. FC Nürnberg, Olaf Rebbe, he was responsible to sign Tsitsipas, a Greek striker, in the last summer from on loan from PAOK Thessaloniki. And his loan with 1. FC Nürnberg, they are playing in the second German league with the head coach Miroslav Klose, the former World Cup winner of Germany, a former world-class striker. They have a loan, but they have an option to buy. The option to buy is worth 18 million euro. This is a massive amount for 1. FC Nürnberg. They will trigger that option to buy, and they want to sell him directly in summer for 25 million euro plus add-ons. Many, many clubs from Europe are involved. Liverpool have an interest. Bayern Munich have a small interest, but right now, this is our exclusive news. Brighton is currently in the pole position to sign Stefanos Tsitsipas in summer, because there have been concrete talks between the striker, Tsitsipas, and with the club officials, and especially with Fabian Hürzeler. And Tsitsipas were convinced of the ideas of Fabian Hürzeler. Nothing signed, nothing agreed. But Brighton is currently in the pole position behind Tottenham and Aston Villa. They are also pushing to sign Stefanos Tsimas in summer.
Florian, thank you very much. Right, it's deadline day in the WSL and we could see two big moves happen. Chloe Kelly has rejected an offer to join Brighton and Kira Walsh could join Chelsea. Anton Tolui can bring us up to speed.
Yeah, two Lionesses are dominating WSL deadline day. Kira Walsh is the one player we expect to get done by the 11 o'clock deadline. She is currently going to London for a medical after Barcelona and Chelsea agreed a deal of around £500,000. A holding midfielder is one of Chelsea's targets this January. And like they did when they went out and signed Naomi Gurm for a world record fee of £900,000 over the weekend, they went out and tried to find the best player they could in that position. And in Walsh, they got one of the best players that England has ever produced in centre midfield. She was keen on a move back to WSL with her contract at Barcelona expiring in the summer. As for Chloe Kelly, the other Lioness, who we want to know what's going to happen between now and 11 o'clock. Well, we know an offer from Brighton, a loan deal, was accepted by Manchester City, but we understand that Kelly has turned that down. There is interest as well from Manchester United. The player obviously wants to stay in Manchester. That's where she's settled, that's where her family is settled. That's where she wants to be able to talk to them. Manchester City's perspective is, well, why would they want to sell or maybe make a deal with a team that is potentially going to compete with them for the Champions League places? At the moment, Manchester United are ahead of Manchester City in the standing. So if it is going to be a deal between the two clubs, it's going to take a lot of negotiation and a lot of rumbling on, despite the fact that Chloe Kelly has publicly admitted how disappointed she is with the whole situation. It's something that's going to go rumble on right until the 11 o'clock deadline.
Just a reminder, John Duran has completed his Al Nassr medical and is set to fly to Saudi Arabia in a deal worth over £64 million. So what about another striker? Where will Evan Ferguson be playing come the end of the window? We'll discuss his future next. By Germany's Florian Plettenberg has said Tottenham have opened talks with Bayern Munich over the signing of Mathis Tel. He's also said there's a couple of other clubs that have been asking Bayern Munich, but Tottenham have officially opened talks with them. I mean, just first of all, Flex, we were sort of talking about Spurs and what they need, and they wanted to add a forward. This could be a real possibility now, it looks like.
Yeah, he's available. He wants to leave Bayern Munich. He's got a whole host of clubs chasing him because he's a top talent around Europe at 19 years of age. And Tottenham could really do with a player of his quality. He fits the bill in terms of the attributes he has. He's quick, he can score goals. Yes, at Bayern Munich, he hasn't maybe reached the heights that they maybe expected after bringing him in from Rennes, but if you try and play up against the likes of Elise, Gnabry, Coman, Sane, and he can play up front, but there's a small matter of Harry Kane there as well, so very difficult to really break through as a young player. That doesn't mean he's not a very good player, and when you look at the problems that Spurs have in terms of forwards being injured, you've got Brennan Johnson, Solanke, Richarlison only just returned, but looks like he could be injured again. Odegaard injured from earlier on in the season, Timo Werner, so they really are struggling in that area of the field, and they need much more reinforcement. So I'm not surprised that Tottenham are at the table opening discussions. What we'll be interested is that how much Spurs are willing to put down on the table. Florian also said to us he can't tell us exactly what the fee would be, but Bayern are open to a permanent move, whereas other teams are looking at potential loans.
They enjoy a good relationship, both clubs. Harry Kane left for Bayern Munich last year, Eric Dyer as well, and Mathis Tel would fit in with what Tottenham have done since Ange Postecoglou took charge in terms of trying to sign young, talented players who they believe they can take to the next level. We've seen that with Brennan Johnson, and he's shown already that he's made for this stage at Tottenham. I know he's injured at the moment, but they're trying to sign these players young and they can fit within Tottenham's structure. And the argument was from some fans is when we're in the situation we're in right now, where we've won one game in 7, when we're 15th in the Premier League table, we need some experience right now. But when I spoke to Ange Postecoglou a couple of times in November and December, the argument was we can't waver away from the plan that we've built here. As painful as it's going to be at times, we're going to go through some serious challenges, which they're going through right now, but they don't want to change their strategy. They want to stick with what they've been doing, and they've been proven correct. You look at how good Mickey van der Ven has been since he signed. He was very young. They spent a lot of money on him, but that's really worked out. I know he's been injured, but you look at what they have done. Wilson Odegaard, that was a surprise signing. Yes, he's injured, but again, I keep naming players that are injured, but when they've been on the pitch, they have been really impressive. So this would make sense for Tottenham right now, although we know there's a lot of interest from a number of Premier League clubs, a number of rivals to Tottenham as well.
Obviously, Mathis Tel's been talking about why he wants to leave Bayern Munich, and that was playing time. He doesn't want to go to a club where there's a lot of competition. He wants to play. And I suppose with those Spurs injuries, Flex, the names you mentioned there, the options that Spurs have, do you expect him to come, if he does go to Spurs, to come in and start? And if so, where? On the left or up top?
Well, he can play across the front. So that's, in terms of whether he plays as a centre-forward or plays on the left-hand side, which he's mainly done while he's been at Bayern Munich, that won't be a problem for him. Of course, just like any player, though, especially for a young player, he's still trying to make his name and live up to the aspirations that have been placed upon him. He still has to come here and work hard. When Dominic Solanke's fit, he's a fantastic number 9. He's brilliant. And when Son is at it, I know he hasn't been at his best, but he's fantastic from the left-hand side. But that is what the new-look Tottenham will be looking for. You know, Son signs an extension and will keep him there an extra year, but he's not the future of Tottenham anymore. So someone like Mathis Tel could be. I would say he's better than Timo Werner. You know,
and Werner will leave at the end of the season. They're not going to extend that.
Exactly, not going to extend that. So there's a space there. Richarlison has his injury problem. So it is up to Mathis Tel to come in and prove that as well. But it might not be an automatic starter. But whilst they have so many injury problems and they need that sort of new lease of life and a bit of freshness about the squad, I think he can come in and definitely start.
Yeah, feels like everyone is after a forward in this transfer window. Developments from West Ham this morning. They've had a loan bid with an option to buy worth £21 million rejected by PSV for striker Ricardo Pepi. West Ham are now discussing alternative forward options. One of those is Brighton's Evan Ferguson. I mean, just first of all, just looking at West Ham and Evan Ferguson, Fletch? Name's not Fletch, your name is Flex. It does feel like this is the perfect match.
It could be. It could be for him because West Ham are in such a need for a striker. Like, the amount of times they've invested heavily into getting a striker and it hasn't worked. You look back to Scamacca, you look back to Haller, you look back to Danny Ings, who's still there now. And it's always Mikel Antonio, who's obviously out with a long-term injury at the minute, but it's always Mikel Antonio who rears his head and saying, I'm not going anywhere, and they end up back there. So for a long-term fix, they've needed this position filled for a long time. With Evan Ferguson, he's come into the league and had 2 decent seasons where he scored goals in a condensed period, but he's shown a lot of promise, but he's been hampered by injury since last year with a serious knee injury and then an ankle injury since. So you're not, similar to Duran in terms of you're not really sure what he's going to be like as the main man, but I think he's worth a punt for West Ham. Evan Ferguson is.
Yeah, I think it's obviously 12 games and 1 goal this season. Last season it was 27 games and 6 goals, but obviously he scored a hat-trick, so 3 of them coming in 1 game. What about Brighton, that perspective, James? Do you feel like they'll feel good about the situation, sort of regardless of what happens?
I think those at Brighton and those in Evan Ferguson's camp, and Evan Ferguson himself, agree that he needs game time to kickstart what it clearly has been a very promising career. You mentioned those stats there. He started last season with 6 goals in 12 matches, but he's now scored twice in 15 months. Clearly, there's been a number of injuries there. Brighton have continued to strengthen it in every window. They've now got Jorginho Ruta as well. So it makes things even more difficult for Evan Ferguson to get minutes, even when Danny Welbeck is unfit and there's a question marks around him because you've got João Pedro there as well. I think Brighton are relaxed about the situation. I think they were really happy a couple of years ago when people were speaking about Evan Ferguson as a potential £90 million striker. That's not going to be the money they get in this window. I know there's an argument and there's a thought that they may sanction a permanent sale in this window, but I think that seems unlikely. They'd get the sort of money they know that they can get. So it feels like 6 months for him being in the shop window. I think Brighton still see him as a long-term part of their future. I don't think it's a case of them trying to cash in on him, but if there is serious money on the table now, then they would. But I would, if I was a buying club, I don't think this would be the window where you try and buy Evan Ferguson because of the injury problems he's had, because it's been such a long period of time since we've seen him consistently play minutes for the club. Ultimately, he's got no realistic chance of playing significant minutes for Brighton this season. So it does make sense, a low move. One thing is fascinating. You said at the top there, everybody wants a forward in this window. This is a forward who scored, as I say, twice in 15 months. It shows there's a real dearth of attacking options right now. That's why there's such a premium on strikers. So it feels like Evan Ferguson needs 6 months on loan somewhere, and then we get to the summer and then we discuss, because I don't think any clubs will be looking to put down serious money because, unfortunately, the injury situation he's been in over the course of the last 2 years.
Yeah, well, teams at the bottom of the Premier League are hoping to do business as well. Southampton have received an £8 million bid from Galatasaray for Kyle Walker-Peters. I mean, Flex, do you think Southampton would even entertain letting him go?
I don't think it makes sense. You know, they're trying to stay in the league. He's a massive voice in the dressing room. He's made 189 appearances for Southampton since his move from Spurs. So for me, they need to be trying to keep him. Of course, they can look at it and say, we might be going down anyway. Do we take 8 million now? But also for Kyle Walker-Peters, he probably wants to stay himself and look at his options in the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, that is all we've got time for. I can't believe we were going to talk about not relegated teams, battle for to stay up. And we've only covered one.
Jumping the gun there.
Anyway, Good Morning Transfers is back at the same time tomorrow. You can catch that at 9 a.m. You can join us at midday for Transfer Talk tomorrow. We'll be at Manchester City, Arsenal and Tottenham. And you won't want to miss this. The transfer shows are coming live from Battersea Power Station. Join Kaveh Solokul, Darmesheth at 5 and again at 7. Thank you very much to Flex and to James. Coming up, it's Lunchtime Live. More on that extended interview with former Premier League referee David Coote.